Well, our next speaker, our next keynote speaker is Mario Guajardo. So Mario's current work focuses on applied machine learning with Google AI on the Kurzweil's research group, where they are finding new ways to use deep learning to model language and conversations like smart reply and smart compose. He also focuses on AI for good as well as ML fairness efforts. More recently, he has been focusing on strengthening the AI ecosystem in Latin America as an ML investments advisor for the Google Launchpad Accelerator in Mexico, as well as ML advisor for Google's AI Impact Challenge. He is also a fellow of the People AI Guidebook, a framework to help develop human-centered AI products, focusing on outreach in Latin America. Please welcome Mario.
Hi everyone. This is the second time I came to RIIAA. I came here a year ago. I grew up in Matamoros in the north. Anyone from the north of Mexico? Norteños. And honestly, I grew up in the border, and some people might joke, well, is that really Mexico or not? So I'm not going to get politically or cultural, but to some extent there is a reality that for me coming to Mexico City, or even different parts of Mexico, we are so diverse that it feels that you go to different countries. And at the same time, all my professional life was done mostly in the US. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that, but the context I want to set is RIIAA really transformed me a year ago, because the hypothesis by which I came, like everything that Andrea read, happened because of RIIAA last year. Basically, my resume a year ago is basically I'm just building models, which is important, but RIIAA changed my perspective to say we need to be intentional about being in Latin America, and you cannot do it from Silicon Valley. You have to come here, and the team and the organizations in Google AI is flexible enough that right now I'm kind of doing a lot of fellowships and invitations so that I can do a lot of this work. So it is exciting to see you, all of you here today in RIIAA, and see how big it has grown in so many dimensions from last year. So I am a child of RIIAA, 2 years old, like most of you that I've seen connecting new faces, but these things do make a difference, particularly in us, and I can see a lot of you. So I feel I take more home than I feel I'm here to give away. A brief introduction, I've been at Google 11 years. So I grew up in Matamoros, as I said. Anyone went to a Cebetis or a Cebeta here in Mexico? All right, bad news, the best one is 135, I'm sorry. Just to say I grew up in the border, never in my wildest dream I thought I would make it to Google. But the accident is, ironically, most people in Matamoros, the pipeline is to go to Monterrey Tech, you get a scholarship. I didn't want to leave family. So the closest thing that I felt could challenge me was University of Texas in Brownsville in the border, so I commuted from Mexico to Brownsville every day. Little I knew that eventually I just kind of left and took it from there. And I've been at Google in so many departments, and what I've done, I optimized for horizontal moves, kind of the 80-20. So I'm not formally trained in ML. Another program I went to Google was a fellowship for 6 months. Google trained me, it's called the ML Ninja program. You come as a black belt. And so in 6 months they train you so that you develop an intuition how to apply ML. So my sweet spot is intersection between research and product, and how do we apply AI effectively. Specifically within the AI group, as I mentioned, we started doing smart compose. We never got it right, especially we talked about gender and fairness. So we got it wrong. We published an article I'm going to show later. We also published a lot of research, and we actually released pre-trained models. So it's one thing to open source TensorFlow, it's another thing to release the pre-trained model. That truly democratizes, because you don't have to have the ginormous amount of data and thousands of CPU cycles. So we also are working now, the state of the art is, okay, if we were able to do smart compose, can we do smart reply, can we do a smart compose? And Google is like a marketplace internally. There are more people in research than there are products, so we all compete with each other. So actually we are competing with Brain. They are taking an approach with a generated model. We are using a semantic ranking model, and we compete all the time. You don't notice this, but you might not know, you might be using different architecture behind the scenes. And we measure and we do, so it's a very interesting field, and it ties to what we're going to talk about today. As I said, this came out of the oven. I gave a workshop in RIIAA a year ago. Who was in my workshop at RIIAA? Any chance? A few of you. Last year, it was good news that we released model. It was bad news that it was English only, right? So that's the problem when you do things out of Silicon Valley or outside markets where our users are. The good news, 2 months ago, this came out of the oven. I couldn't give a workshop this year because I gave another one, which is on today's talk, but these modules are all public. So you can send me an email, Guajardo@Google, or you can Google Universal Sentence Encoder. Finally, as I said, gender fairness, we never get it right. So last year we published an article that we studied how did we mess up in smart reply. And basically, if there is an email that says, is the engineer coming to the interview tomorrow? What do you think smart reply said? Yes, he will be here tomorrow. What? Like, engineers are not just guys, right? So how we fix this is the topics of today's conversations. The answer is, I'll give you a hint, we didn't have to retrain the model. It was a UX change in the user interface. They mentioned about AI for social good. I've been working on that in various fronts. And one of them is working with the AI Impact Challenge. We're working with 21 countries around the world to solve problems where AI can make a difference. And finally, last but not least, so Paco Solsona will lead the panel next, but he has embraced me on his team. So informally, I became kind of a virtual member of his team. So I've been coming to Mexico, it's probably my 6th time, working with startups in Latin America through the Google Launchpad Accelerator Program. Today I met some of the Google developer experts who will be on the panel. And for me, that's where RIIAA started. You have to come here, you have to see it in action, you have to make a connection, and you have to be intentional about making change. So that's about me. We are going to transition in the next 12 minutes into something that we gave a workshop for 3 hours in RIIAA in the last 2 days. Raise your hand if you were in the workshop for best practices. Some of you might be asking, hey, I didn't even get an invite. It was by design. There are a lot of good courses in RIIAA with a lot of focus on research, but we wanted to also provide something for those of you who are professional in the industry and are either applying AI or are thinking applying. So the motivation of today's talk is something that started within Google, that we realized there are some things that we mess up and there are some things that we do right when it comes to applying AI to our products. So about 100 of us came together for over a year and we collected the best practices that I'm going to talk about to them today. The good news, these are all publicly available. It's a new guidebook that came out. You can literally Google the name People Plus AI Guidebook. And I'm going to give the links and everything, but I want to tell you a story of why are we doing this and what is something we wanted to hear you today. It's an AI conference. I don't have to explain what's AI or machine learning, but just to set the stage, I'm using AI and ML interchangeably just to simplify the discourse. I know one is a superset of the other, but just keep that in mind. What's important is any machine learning model, basically what it's doing is learning patterns from data. And that had created this explosion of applications as you say low-stake ones, as music recommendation, few mistakes, no big deal. But also high-stake ones, right? Like cellular cars. We heard presentation today about health applications. But what happens is that we ended up noticing, and we wanted to make sure that users actually feel in control of the technology, and it's not the technology who's taking control of the different scenarios. And here I gonna bring a little bit more controversial topic. And even in the word artificial intelligence, a lot of people, especially who are not in this room, if you ask, Pablo was talking about the podcast in the Uber ride, I'm sure if you would have asked the Uber driver about the thoughts, they think about a magic box, right? AI is magic. And what I want to emphasize, there is no magic, and everything has to do with human judgment. Either intended or unintended, we are the ones who are embedding our own human decisions into the process. Okay, what's the pipeline for an ML? Just to say in the context is we train data, we build models, and evaluate them, and then we deploy them to production to different products or platforms in the form of predictions, recommendations, and all sorts of applications. This is the catch. In every step, we intervene human judgment. We are the one who choose the training sets, how balanced they are, how representative they are. That's all our human judgment. We choose the metric we pick to evaluate these models with. And ultimately, we as users are the ones who are affected, and we are the ones who, given user interaction, collect even further training data, but we also apply that judgment. So because of that and other things, within Google AI, we have an effort and a team called the People Plus AI Guidebook, with which I'm a fellow. And what we do is to try to find intersection between humans and applications and technology, particularly AI. So the good news is this guidebook that I mentioned just came out in Google I/O in May. And I'm going to give you, in the next 8 minutes, like a high-level overview. And what I want you to take home is two things. Why are we doing this? Why do you think it's the value? It is also a conversation. We want to iterate on this material, and it's all publicly available to you. So this is how it looks. It's 6 chapters. It doesn't read like a book end to end. There is actually no sequence, and a lot depends where is your organization at. So the 6 chapters that it covers is things like why, like a lot of people start saying, how can I use AI for? What we want to say is change the mindset and say, how can I solve X? And then, is AI uniquely positioned to help me solve X? So the first chapter is about understanding the user needs. How do we define success? It's simple, we're going to do a deep dive. And it has nothing to do with the models or the data, so that you actually do not lose sight of what you are actually building for in the first place. And there are others. For today, because of time, we're going to dive into 3 of them. User success that I mentioned. Once you have aligned the reason what you're building, who are you building it for, and how do you find success, what's your data collection strategy and evaluation strategy. And this is very important, right? There is this idea of like, can I trust AI? So this is something called calibrated trust that we talked in the guidebook. And either extreme, there is an opportunity loss there. If there's too much trust the user is not supposed to have for a certain application, or too little trust for some other. So I'm going to give you an example of that as well. Let us motivate it with a real scenario, because one thing is to say, hey, we think these are the best practices, but are we putting our mouth where our money is? So through the year that we built the guidebook, we identified product teams that were looking to launch AI featured applications. So one of them that we partnered with was the Google Flights, and they were looking to launch this feature that tells you whether the flight is going to increase in price. Because what we identified, the #1 need our user have in Google Flight is, when should I book the flight? Should I book it today or should I wait tomorrow? That's the highest value they find. And in the case of Google Flights, we wanted to identify whether AI would add unique value. And there are many chapters, many sections. The ones in gray, I'm not talking, but they are on the guidebook. The one I'm going to highlight is there a definition of success we can optimize for? So what we do is, and here before we go into confusion matrix, is people who were here in the workshop this week, we got a lot of positive feedback, constructive feedback, and something in between. But the constructive feedback, there was a theme. The reason you didn't get an invite is because most people that we invited were not registered in RIIAA, and they were PMs, they were user experience researchers, they were front-end developers, plus a select pool of people from RIIAA who have AI background and ML. So the first thing from the guidebook is meant to be run in your organization in a cross-functional setting with all these different participants. We want to democratize not only the algorithms and the data, but also the conversation. Yes, as technologists, we have a lot of the know-how, but somehow it has fallen into us as a default decision makers when it comes. So the guidebook is trying to facilitate that. And the question is, how do you have those conversations? So we could provide a framework, we provide templates, and part of the feedback, there were some people who came from a UX background with 0 ML experience, and they went back so nurtured that they were able to add value to the conversation through the framework and the language that the guidebook provided. Similarly, Pablo from DeepMind, that saw the keynote, he was also a guinea pig in the guidebook. You know, he's done AI for a long time. He took a lot of value having interacted with the people across the aisle as well. So everybody got something. So one of the examples we did in the guidebook is we provide a confusion metrics not in the mathematical sense, but more in the way to have a common language. So let's think about what do we do. So let's say you're the flight teams, you bring your cross-functional team. So what the guidebook tells you is, you know what? The NO model will get it right and we'll get it wrong, right? We'll get it right, and when you get it wrong, it'll give you guidance of what decisions you want to make in that thing. So when you get it right, let's say that I'm buying a flight. Tomorrow the price is going to go up and my model gets it right. It predicts correctly, it'll go up. So no problem. Similarly, when it's not going to go up and it doesn't go up, that's fine. The problem is when there are errors, what happens? And the point here is not a technical choice. It's a choice that can impact the user independently of the technicality. So one example is, on one hand, let's say in reality, the price will not increase tomorrow. Our model thinks it will increase, and it tells you, hey, you should buy it today because it's not going to increase, right? So our user believes us, she buys it, and then tomorrow she goes back and checks and it didn't go up, right? So there is some trust lost there, but there wasn't a financial hit. On the other hand, and that's the key point, and that's the level of conversations we want to have, is what happens when the price is actually going to increase, but our model with a high degree of confidence thinks that you should not buy it. And we Google people say, hey, it's Google, maybe it must be true. It tells you like, don't buy it, right? What happens? You go tomorrow, double the price, you cannot attend the wedding. Whatever it needs to do is a high-stakes situation. So not only the trust, right? Both trusts got diluted, but in one of them also there was a monetary impact. This is the point of today's guide. There is one thing you go home with, is that that's the level of conversation we want to have. It's not, shall I use a convolutional neural network, shall I use an LSTM? It is these levels of conversations that we want to have. So that's the first chapter. Let's take the second one. So we align on the user need. We know how to define success. Let's talk about data. But at which level do we want to talk about data? The word that comes to mind is alignment. So what we want to do is, do the user needs and the definition of success, do they align with the outputs of my model? So how do we do that? So our user need is clear. When do the user needs to book? So what should the AI output be? Let's keep it simple at this level. All we need to know is how good the price is today, and what is the prediction for a future, is it going to go up or down? Then, and that's clearly aligned to the need that we have in the users. If you notice, we don't start from what data we have. A lot of organizations, startups that we have worked with, non-profits, all sorts of companies. Even in the course yesterday, I was picking on someone from an organization I'm not gonna name, but he was saying, we have all this data. How can we squeeze insights from it, right? Let's do. So we haven't even touched about data. That's the last step, where given the AI output, what kind of data do I need to support so my model can learn the output that will support the user need, right? So that's the last thing, and it falls on itself. Yeah, I need historical data, I need dates, I need destinations, but if you notice, we never learn from that. And it's also that this tightly related to the output. There is nothing else. There is no extra unnecessary things as well. It is a framework, but we wanted to make it easy into how to have this conversation. So if you go into the guidebook site right now, you can download a PDF that has 20 pages of templates for each chapter. So do the math. You have 100 plus. And the idea is not sequential. You can grab the 20 pages, you can come with your organizations, and you can say, hey, today we're going to do an assessment and a 360 around our user needs. And you can go through the guidebook. In this case, is the data and evaluation chapter. Finally, the last nugget is, let's say we built a model that is aligned with the user needs. But how do we do with the output, and how do we communicate the output so that it's appropriate for the use case, so that the user can build the right level of trust and us explaining it. So one piece I want to highlight, because it is aligned in top, is one component to say, what do I do with this number, 87.6% of my ratio model, right? Like, what do I do that? Do I just print it on the UI? Do I don't show it at all? If I show it, how do I show it, right? It's not a technical choice, right? And again, if you go to the data scientist, she's doing a great job, but maybe she is not connected to the end user. I mean, not that they don't have to be. You want the conversation of others are connected with the user. So normally, a lot of the times, actually, you don't need to display that confidence level. And I'm using confidence. I know there are other things like semantic ranking. There is always some level of certainty. So what do you do with that number? I'm oversimplifying as well. And if you were to display it, there are trade-offs for how you do it. If you were to do it, these are just some examples. It's not exhaustive. And you see a lot of these kind of US treatments in Google products. The first one is you cluster things that are somewhat in the same confidence level in the same one, right? So Google.com is a good example, right? The first page is basically the good match. The second page is that, right? So intuitively, we know the first hit is better than the second, but we let you as humans do your own judgment that you may pick the second one, and that's totally fine. The other one is like a recommendation for a restaurant, so you give you the hit, and we'll give you a few options just in case we kind of messed up. This second one is another family where you throw a lot of data, and these are generally for high-stakes situations. Let's say you have a medical application, it's a medical imaging situation. You do want to show that 87.6% plus a bunch of other things. And the premise is that you're working with a professional, like Pablo was saying with the artist, you're augmenting their capabilities. So it is important for them to know. Whereas my mom is booking a flight from Matamoros to the DF, right? So she doesn't need to know on Google Flights that she has 80.76% chance of going to flight out. So what did we do for Google Flights? We actually chose not to show any confidence. That was the best thing, right? There might be some jet set flyer who needed it, but for the most cases, that showing it did more harm. So we didn't even go to the UI treatment, we chose. And there is a subtlety. When we chose to show it, was only the very high confidence situations. We don't even show even on the medium one as well. And it goes back to letting, not diluting the trust in a high stake situation. So this is how it looks like, but if you look at the application, it not always comes up, and now you know why. It's basically we were somewhere in the middle, and we didn't want to misguide you. So very briefly, lightning talks go super fast. The last thing, just to wrap up. So it is a conversation, as I said at the beginning. There is a button right here called feedback. You cannot see it because of the way the chairs are. But when you go to the Guidebook, please tell us how you're doing. We also want to find success stories. If you deploy this in an organization, please let us know. I have cards. You can find me at the end to get my contact information. And as I said, it is us humans and our judgments, intended or unintended, that will build in this, and we have the responsibility. And now we are humbly providing a way by which we can have this level of interdisciplinary conversation. There was from Cuenca startup, Glenda, she was in our class Friday. We went around and we asked them, give us one takeaway. And she said, what I like this about this, what the best thing about this is just, she said, I just need to say one word, interdisciplinary. So that's where I am, that's the side. Let's go build great applications, but let's always remember why are we building them for, who are we building them for. Talk about the economy panel in the morning, those who are less privileged. Let's build for them and let's start there. If AI comes, great. If it doesn't, it's also great. Thank you so much.